just want to walk into a potential mirror match right from the first turn.
I mean, it is only game one, and going into that mirror match in game one might give them an opportunity to sort of feel out how the opponent would handle that, as it looks like that is what we're getting. You know, Kangaskhan and Tornadus making an appearance on both sides of the fields. These trainers are just ready to start getting that information and start, you know, swapping fake outs and duking it out.
Yeah, presumably, I mean, these will probably have a lot of speed ties here as well. Typically trainers will want to run both of these with max speed investment. So, I mean, turn one, the safest play from both players then is to really fake out the opposing Tornadus. You don't want to fake out a Kangaskhan because, of course, it could even not Mega Evolve if it has Inner Focus, not get flinched, and fake out the opposing Tornadus. So it is probably best to just both fake out here and you kind of just bypass turn one.
Yeah, but that'll also maybe set them up a little bit for success going into turn two, since, you know, we did see Flavio's Mega Kangaskhan Mega Evolve first, so that could be an indication of a speed tie or, you know, just how these Pokemon are trained. I think we'll sort of learn more as Ashton's Kangaskhan does move first with the fake out. So assuming Flavio's Kangaskhan does go for fake out as well, I think that's a nice confirmation that, yes, these two Pokemon are, you know, tied in speed. So that's definitely going to come into play as we move forward, as it looks like Ashton's Tornadus will move second. Yeah,
so presumably, once again, I think they should be max speed here. Either way, going for the safest play possible on both ends. I mean, I think Tailwind should be coming out this next turn, but like you mentioned, there is the potential to actually go for the Z Tailwind in case one of the players wants to get fancy and maybe try to go for a taunt. But I think that would be way too risky, because if you go for a taunt and they Z Tailwind, or they just win the speed tie, you know, then you'd be playing from behind. So I think both players here probably going to want to opt for Tailwind. Kangaskhan's, of course, have the opportunity to just knock out the opposing Tornadus, and we are going to kick it off with a Z move.
All right, well, it is that Flying Z dance, so I guess it'll be take a moment to reveal whether or not we're going to see that critical hit ratio boost. So there is that Z Tailwind right there. Tornadus just playing it super safe on Ashton's side of the field, does not want to worry about being taunted. Maybe we'll get some critical hits later, who knows. But interesting to note that Flavio's Tornadus did not go for the Z move, so it still has that option available for a Supersonic Sky Strike later on in the game. Double Edge from Flavio's Kangaskhan will knock out Ashton's Tornadus, and Ashton's Kangaskhan is just going to be left to deal some damage of its own. Also going for a Double Edge, potentially also going into that Tornadus and also getting a knockout.
Yeah, so I mean, this game has played out, I think, exactly how we expected to. No player really trying to deviate from the other strategy, and they've both been making those plays because I think you do need to prioritize knocking out Tornadus here. Leaving it unchecked means it will get a big potential Z move off against Groudon or Xerneas, which these players probably have in the back. So, yeah, I mean, things have played out how we've expected to. Who the players bring out here is a big deal, though, because I think Groudon and Xerneas are both viable options. So both actually opting for Groudon, not wanting to bring their key member to the team in Xerneas out yet. And now we actually do have to wonder, how are these Groudons trained and who is going to be faster between the two? Because if whoever has the speed advantage here is really going to make a difference, especially because the Tailwinds are matched. So we're basically playing on equal grounds. But that's why both players prioritize setting up Tailwind. You know, if your opponent sets it up and you don't, then you'll probably just lose the game, because these teams are rather offensive in nature.
Yeah, so I want to sort of touch on something you said where, both these trainers are playing very safe and sort of following, the same pattern. How do you know when to break from that pattern? Because assuming both these trainers keep, making the same prioritizations, using the same attacks, we're going to keep seeing sort of the same turns play out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is game one, so I think both players are still vying for information, which is why they're going for like the safer cores.
Yeah.
Once they figure out, oh, maybe we do speed tie or I am just naturally slower, then you can deviate from your strategy a little bit in game one. But it's no surprise to see that both players have opted for what they have game one. And ooh, the Kangaskhan from Flavio's end goes first. Is it going to be able to knock out the Kangaskhan? It does.
It is. That was a low kick, which is a move that I don't think we've seen on a Kangaskhan yet throughout the day. Normally they have Double Edge and a Dark type move, so I'll be curious to see, what move that was replacing. Ashton's Groudon, though, was able to move first and uses Earth Power to knock out Flavio's Groudon. So I think a Kangaskhan for a Groudon is probably the better trade, at least for Ashton.
Yeah, definitely. And, I mean, so many potential speed ties going on here, right?
I know, right?
That's a big knockout, though. I mean, yeah, you'd imagine that had Flavio obviously gone first, he would have been able to get that big Earth Power and Precipice Blades off before getting knocked out. It's such a big damage calculation, too, knowing that the Groudon just is able to one-hit KO the opposing Groudon. So we've got Kangaskhan and Xerneas out now on Flavio's end, and of course Ashton has both of his restricted. So you're going to be taking recoil damage from Double Edge, and so that's also a really big deal. it's not out, or Flavio definitely has a chance of winning this, but once again, like, the speeds just matter so much here. So, I mean, Kangaskhan probably wants to prioritize the damage on the Xerneas, but then you have to worry about a potential eruption from the opposing Groudon. Yeah,
Groudon's really unopposed right now. It can take some damage, but the Sunlight's still on the field. It still has access to that Earth Power that we saw, and maybe an Overheat. I think we saw that on Ashton's team yesterday. And I actually saw an Overheat just flat out knock out a Xerneas in the sun before it was able to Geomancy. So it's definitely something you have to be afraid of if you're in Flavio's position. Ashton's 2 remaining Pokemon are just so powerful.
Yeah, the double edge here. Let's see who it targets. Presumably, yeah, you're going to have to target down the Groudon there, I think. Otherwise, you'll just let it get way too powerful of an eruption off, since Ashton is running the special variant. But we're going to see the Geomancy come out first. It's going to be, like, the Xerneas has probably trade Geomancy here, because if you don't Geomancy, you will just get knocked out. But the thing is, Ashton has both of his restricted Pokemon out, and I think Groudon definitely has the advantage here over Kangaskhan.
Definitely, and as far as we can tell, his Xerneas is faster. I mean, it did move first.
Yeah.
This could just be Ashton getting lucky with more speed ties, but I kind of want to rewind things a little bit back to the Groudon turn, as Ashton's Groudon will go for an eruption in the sun, which, thanks to the damage from Kangaskhan, it leaves it on the field for one more turn, so that's pretty good. But I believe we saw Flavio's Groudon, Primal Revert first, but then Ashton's Groudon attack first.
Yeah.
Which I think that's, again, confirmation of another speed tie, which is going to make Game 2 really interesting, because a lot of this just seems like, okay, which Pokemon's going to move first? Which Pokemon gets the knockouts, like you've been saying? It's a really tough mirror match in that regard.
Yeah, and I think Flavio gets some really important information here. We saw the Xerneas actually move after the Groudon, so this is definitely not a speed tie between the Xerneas, as Ashton opting for like a timid variant, and this Groudon on his end is probably max speed as well, whereas Xerneas on Flavio's end probably that modest version, and so that's actually a really big deal, because like you mentioned, Groudon gets access to these really powerful fire type attacks, and I think we'll just see Ashton be able to clean out this game now, unless there are some major critical hits here from Flavio's end.
I mean, maybe a Moonblast from that Xerneas should be able to take down the Groudon, but unfortunately for Flavio, that'll leave the Xerneas on the field. Targeting Ashton's Xerneas instead does about 50% of its health. It's not enough for a knockout, no special attack drop, and the Overheat from Groudon should seal things up and make Ashton, one game up over Flavio in this series.
Yeah, so what Flavio was going for there is if you are able to get a critical hit onto the opposing Xerneas, and Ashton has to rely on hitting an Overheat to be able to get that knockout, because Eruption or Earth Power won't get the knockout after the boost. So definitely Flavio's best play, but yeah, unfortunate speed tie between the Groudons there. That is going to be a really big deal in this matchup, because, I mean, Groudon is such an important Pokemon in this matchup. But I think, yeah, once again, Flavio gets some really important information. He knows that his Xerneas is slower, and so even if you're matching Tailwinds, you're going to be going last. Then I think, in a mirror match like this, that's not the kind of position you want to put yourself into.
Definitely not. But is there really any adjustment that Flavio can make so that maybe he doesn't have to rely on speed ties as much going into Game 2?
Yeah, that's a great question, and honestly, it's pretty tough. I mean, maybe you can lead just with like Kangaskhan and Xerneas immediately. Incineroar is like kind of a potential Pokemon to bring. There's the Como, which we haven't really even mentioned, but I think it's pretty hard to bring that into a matchup against Tornadus and Xerneas. So, I mean, this is one of the mirror matches where one team just has a little bit of an advantage because it does have some natural speed, But, the low kick from Flavio's end was also a big reveal. I'm not sure if Ashton's Kangaskhan is also opting for that low kick. We saw a bunch of moves on it yesterday, so that could be a big deal as well, because it means that Flavio at least has a way to knock out Ashton's Kangaskhan low consistently after the damage, but Ashton's might not be able to in return if it's not carrying a low kick.
Yeah, that's definitely something that Ashton should keep a mind on, but it looks like he's pretty comfortable with his strategy, locking in relatively quick while Flavio's taking a little more time to think things out. I almost wonder if we're going to see, same leads, that Kangaskhan and Tornadus combination from both these trainers, but maybe some sort of mix-up in, maybe where the fake-outs target, try to get like a Tailwind up that way early on, or...
I think Flavio, might want to consider not Tailwinding the same turn as Ashton and going for the Z Tailwind the following turn after, so you get one extra turn of Tailwind, which could be huge in setting up Geomancy. We actually do see a direct switch out, though, and I like the Incineroar bring here. Intimidate's obviously quite good against Kangaskhan. it's just still scary playing against this lead because there's not much stopping Ashton from just clicking Fake Out onto Incineroar and taunting the Xerneas. So I think Flavio probably won't be very inclined to just click the Geomancy button immediately. Instead, he might just go for some damage. But then the problem is the next turn, Kangaskhan and Tornadus will both be faster than Xerneas, and you'll threaten with a Z Hurricane and like a double edge. So still kind of a tricky position for Flavio to be in. The Intimidate's obviously quite helpful, but the main thing is that Ashton doesn't even need Tailwind because he's got the speed advantage. But if it's Kangaskhan coming in here, I actually really like this play from Flavio's end. Don't go for the Fake Out.
Exactly. Kangaskhan comes in unintimidated. It'll have Fake Out again next turn, and will possibly be able to deal some nice damage as well once it can start targeting Pokemon with low kick in the future. So Kangaskhan on Ashton's side of the field is going to Mega Evolve. Xerneas opting for a Protect, probably afraid of that taunt that Tornadus can bring. Fake Out from that Kangaskhan connecting with that Xerneas, and Tornadus not even going to bother with taunting quite yet, just going straight for that Tailwind.
Yeah, so Ashton getting, the better end of it instead of just wasting a taunt. Now he does have the speed advantage, but I really like how Flavio adjusted there, pressuring with Fake Out immediately, and then being able to switch in Kangaskhan, which means like now you can Fake Out the Tornadus. Ashton's Kangaskhan, of course, is intimidated, so we can't just see a Fake Out go into the Tornadus and a relatively free Geomancy. Don't have to worry about taunt, but yeah, I mean, Ashton can maybe go for a Bite to try to go for a flinch, might go for a double edge just for some damage, or if he has a tech move like Roar, that will be able to just stop the Xerneas immediately.
Well, if Kangaskhan doesn't attack before the Xerneas moves, I think this is a confirmation that there should be a Roar coming out.
Yeah.
Ashton revealed that yesterday on stream, and it works really well against Xerneas because it's just not something you expect. I mean, not that I would say I expect anything on Kangaskhan at this point since it's so new to the format, but being able to have this slot on your team dedicated to forcing your opponent to switch out is huge, because now the Power Herb's gone. This Xerneas is going to be forced to come back in later. And yes, the Kangaskhan gets intimidated again for it, but I think that was definitely a huge payoff for Ashton. Xerneas is essentially not going to be as threatening as it was in Game 1.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, great play by Ashton there. Pretty much the safest option possible.
Definitely.
Yeah, you do want to click Roar there, and I think like Roar is a pretty surprising move to see on a Pokemon like Kangaskhan of all Pokemon. So I don't know, Flavio, I feel like he probably has to really go for it there. The thing is, Moonblast can actually be getting pretty consistent damage off against both of these Pokemon, so you can make an argument for it. The upside for Flavio right now is he does have the Intimidate. Kangaskhan and Ashton's end is relatively, won't do very much damage. Tornadus, of course, gets access to the Z move, but won't be able to knock out either of these. So, I mean, Ashton could switch out the Kangaskhan, or you could just maybe double up with like a double edge and a Z move. Incineroar, however, of course, does get access to a Fake Out right now, but yeah, Flavio's in a really tricky position, and Ashton opting not to guarantee a knockout, but rather just being able to conserve that Kangaskhan because, of course, its double edges still hit really hard before the Intimidates.
Yeah, and I think that was a pretty safe switch, even though he is sending in that Xerneas, as it looks like Flavio's going to adjust as well and send his own Xerneas back in. I think Flavio's really doing his best to try and stall out the remainder of this Tailwind, so, at least he has a shot, because assuming that the adjustment he made was the Incineroar for the Tornadus, he has no access to Tailwind on his side at all. So, Ashton's Tornadus is going to be able to go for a Supersonic Sky Strike this turn, which, again, is going to deal a decent amount of damage to that Kangaskhan. But if Flavio can find a way to knock out this Tornadus before, Tailwind expires and it can reset it, that might be a really good, as best as he can get.
Yeah, the problem is he just doesn't have very good damage output. That's a great Z move into the Xerneas as well. I mean, that's one of the two restricted Pokemon.
Yeah.
The U-turn out here will at least give out some positioning, but Tailwind's up, and Ashton is kind of can set up a Geomancy relatively free. I mean, I think you kind of have to bring in the Kangaskhan here to at least go for Fake Out. If you bring out Groudon, then the Xerneas is pretty content to just click Geomancy.
Yeah.
We haven't really seen the, and he actually is going to bring out Groudon, so kind of just saying, okay, I'm going to bring my two strongest Pokemon right now and just hope to get some good damage off. But yeah, we didn't really see what Groudon Flavio is carrying, so if it is physical with Precipice Blades, maybe you let the Geomancy go up, hope that Moonblast and Precipice Blades knocks out this Xerneas on Ashton's end, which is a relatively speedy variant. That being said, Ashton doesn't even have to click Geomancy. He can just click something like Moonblast or even a Protect and maybe just try to Hurricane with Tornadus or even switch out. So Ashton has a plethora of options right now, and once again, he is also threatening with the Geomancy at any point with Xerneas, and that's what makes it so scary.
It really is, like, terrifying when you think about it, since Xerneas is, one of the most central Pokemon in the format right now. And even though this Tornadus is it feels like Tornadus is almost stuck on the field. Like, you don't really want to switch in something to take a Precipice Blades or an Eruption or any really Groudon attack at this point. But just the fact that it's able to sit on the field, and it looks like even extend some more speed control in the form of Icy Wind, which will connect with both of Flavio's Pokemon. If this Groudon doesn't switch out, or if this Kangaskhan doesn't switch out once Tailwind expires, that's just further assurance for Ashton that his Pokemon will be faster. And Xerneas is, like you said, able to get that Geomancy up relatively unthreatened. Yeah, so Flavio going for kind of a clever play there, hoping that the Xerneas is going to protect in front of the opposing Xerneas and Groudon. If that happens, then you can take advantage of that by pivoting in Kangaskhan and basically being able to click Fake Out and a Fire-type attack or a Ground-type attack on Groudon the following turn. Ashton, however, doesn't walk into that, just sets up the Geomancy. The Eruption does come out, so confirming a special variant here on Flavio's end, so that should be able to knock out Tornadus. And, the Xerneas still takes a lot of damage, but now it is set up, and with Tailwind expiring, speed is, a little bit more evened out now, but because of that Icy Wind, the Groudon on Ashton's end will be actually able to outspeed both opposing Pokemon. So Ashton's put himself into a really good position. He obviously has to worry about Fake Out this upcoming turn, and so for that reason, he doesn't actually want to bring in his Groudon quite yet. Now with Kangaskhan out, you'll have the faster Fake Out because of the Icy Wind. But do you Fake Out the Kangaskhan so the Kangaskhan can't Fake Out, or do you Fake Out the Groudon and try to get more damage down this turn? Yeah, I think it's probably safer for Ashton to Fake Out the Groudon and attack the Kangaskhan slot with something like a Moonblast, as Incineroar should come in here to get the Intimidate off, if that is the case. One of the advantages, though, for Flavio in bringing Incineroar is that he does get to cycle multiple Fake-Outs, and that's one way to potentially deal with the Xerneas because you're putting on more pressure and denying it from attacking more often. Groudon will protect this turn, so not going to take any damage from this Xerneas or this Kangaskhan, depending on what move it decided to go for. Fake Out into the Groudon slot. Xerneas left on Ashton's side of the field to go for a Moonblast, like you said, into that Incineroar. So, again, just playing it very safe, but, he doesn't have a lot to worry about, so why not? Yeah, this next turn will be a little bit interesting because Ashton's Kangaskhan is intimidated, so not sure a Double Edge from it would knock out the Incineroar there. And Xerneas is in a position where, you might want to protect in case you don't want to really take any damage. Of course, because it is boosted and because it is a special Groudon yet you are going up against, maybe you'll feel comfortable enough to actually eat a Fake Out. But of course, if there is an Overheat on Flavio's end, then Fake Out plus Overheat might knock out, but no Protect from the Xerneas. All right, that Fake Out going into the Kangaskhan. Xerneas following up with a Dazzling Gleam, going to connect with both the Pokemon on Flavio's side of the field. Misses the KO on Incineroar, leaving Groudon at half of its health. And Groudon revealing Roar. So Flavio bringing a Roar of his own, cycling out that Xerneas by force, bringing out Ashton's Groudon, and, giving him a chance, it almost feels like. We still know that Ashton's Groudon is going to be faster thanks to that Icy Wind, but, maybe Flavio can pivot out of this. Yeah, it's still definitely in Ashton's favor right now, though, because he's distributed so much damage and nothing on Flavio's end resists Earth Power or Double Edge. So right now, Ashton has a pretty safe play of just, double edging the Incineroar and going for an Earth Power into Groudon. And because everything is so heavily damaged on Flavio's end and because there's no threat of the Xerneas Geomancy, he's still going to be really difficult to win this one. But, yeah, Ashton made a really nice call that last game, last turn. Didn't end up protecting the Xerneas, fearing a potential Roar from either Incineroar or Groudon, just getting a lot of free damage off. And because Fake Out went into Xerneas, that was huge. And Ashton also saving his own Fake Out own Xerneas. So looks like these Xerneas might be taking a bit of damage from these Groudons depending on who attacks where. I wouldn't be surprised if Ashton just goes for the Earth Power again into the opposing Groudon, which is probably why Flavio protected this turn. He's just not ready to lose that Pokemon since it really is one of the last remaining Pokemon he has. But Ashton calling that, going for an Eruption, going to connect with that Xerneas, and due to its relatively full health, that should be a knockout. Yeah, interesting choice to go for the Eruption there. Guarantees obviously a knockout onto Xerneas. It covers the switch out options as well, but obviously, Groudon had the potential to go for an Earth Power there. I think Flavio probably expecting Ashton to play it a little bit safer there. Ashton inside, however, does get the knockout. Kangaskhan does come out, so you can at least go for a Fake Out now. And but the main thing is that Groudon is slower on Flavio's end. That's part of the problem here. And it's heavily damaged as well, so its Eruptions are doing far less. Yeah, it almost feels like Ashton's safe play here is to protect the Groudon, have Xerneas, deal some damage to the opposing side of the field, and, just sort of keep his Groudon safe for the next turn when he can start targeting down Flavio's Pokemon again.
Yeah, so, I mean, if Flavio wants to predict that, he could, of course, go for a Fake Out and Earth Power into the Xerneas, which might knock out. So the Xerneas is actually switching out into the Kangaskhan, which, of course, resets the Fake Out pressure, but this is going to be a big turn. Did the Groudon on Ashton's end protect? And, Flavio's actually switching out his Groudon, so no knockout pressure, but then, of course, that resets the Icy Wind speed, which I think is really critical.
Yeah, definitely, because that brings those Groudons back into a speed tie, and because Ashton's Tornadus was already knocked out, there's no real threat of that speed control being set up in any form. Ashton also going for the protect on the Groudon to keep it safe, and Kangaskhan not going for a fake out. Instead, Double Edge will connect with Ashton's Kangaskhan and just barely misses that knockout.
So, yeah, I mean, this is a really high-level game, actually. I feel like both players have been playing really, really well. And Flavio
yeah, definitely.
Has been utilizing his fake-outs really quite well. The pressure of it, he's been making switches and not just clicking like the obvious fake-out that he can be going for. So, resetting Groudon speed, really critical there. And also making a great read into the Groudon protecting there. So Ashton, of course, had the opportunity. If he clicks Eruption there, the game is probably just over, but instead goes for the safe protect, like you mentioned, and Flavio is able to capitalize off that. Of course, Ashton now does have the faster fake out between Incineroar and Kangaskhan, so you can imagine maybe just click the fake out onto the opposing Kangaskhan and get a guaranteed knockout, or you can fake out the Incineroar and click Eruption.
All right, well, the fake out does go into that Incineroar and will knock it out. Ashton's Groudon free to attack, does not have to worry.
He's going for the flinch.
Bite will connect twice with Groudon. It has 2 chances to potentially flinch here.
And
Groudon does flinch. Flavio might have found himself an out.
Yeah, I mean, he's going for what he needs to, right? Because your only way is to win a speed tie and deny the Kangaskhan from getting knocked out. The thing is, because Flavio actually brought out the Incineroar, the Kangaskhan is intimidated. I'm not sure a Double Edge will knock out the opposing Groudon, but Ashton, of course, can potentially pivot out by protecting his Groudon here and switching Kangaskhan into Xerneas.
But that would still leave the Kangaskhan on the field for Flavio. I mean, he might have more opportunities to go for those flinches, which you really don't want to leave that option open, especially when this game feels like it's so close.
Yeah, I mean...
It's scary.
Yeah, it really might come down to speed ties, which is the nature of mirror matches. I mean, so here Ashton has to make the important decision, right? Like, do you... Especially because, yeah, the Groudon didn't protect last turn, so he has the opportunity to protect Groudon, maybe switch out Kangaskhan. Xerneas will come out, and then that at least threatens with a Moonblast. But he's not switching out, and it's just a Double Edge coming out.
Oh, man, that Double Edge from that Kangaskhan will get the knockout on Ashton's Kangaskhan.
Whose Groudon goes first here?
I don't know. It's going to be close. It's going to be the opposing Groudon with the Earth Power, winning the speed tie this time around.
Wow.
That should be a knockout onto Ashton's Groudon, and Flavio has found his way into a Game 3 here.
Yeah, I mean...
This is insane.
It's still not over. Of course, Ashton does have Xerneas, but a Xerneas Moonblast probably doesn't knock out Groudon from that range, and Kangaskhan's still quite healthy, unintimidated, should just be able to click Double Edge. So, yeah, I think Flavio should be able to win this. And I mean, it came down to that speed tie. The combination of the flinch and Flavio winning the speed tie, that was his out, but... Yeah, that was so well played. It looked all but over in the...
I know.
But that key turn where he roared with the Groudon, this was still Ashton's game to lose, but unfortunately he didn't have the rolls go in his favor. But in a matchup like this, in the first game, Flavio lost that speed tie. So it's like whoever attacks between these Groudons first, it really feels like will win the match because they're able to just one-hit KO the opposing Groudon. But wow, I mean, great adjustments by Flavio. I thought Ashton was playing so well too, right? He did almost everything that he could have, and he put himself in a position where most of the time he wins that game, right? If you don't get flinched by the bite or if you win the speed tie, either of those happen, then you'll win the game. But unfortunately for Ashton, neither of those happened, but incredible awareness by Flavio and great adjustments. I really, really loved that he brought Incineroar in this to psycho out, intimidate, and fake out. Both of those were absolutely essential.
I also got to say, I loved how they both kept their cool throughout that entire game.
Yeah.
I feel like if I were in Flavio's shoes, I would have been so nervous knowing that really it just felt like his win conditions were slipping away. But, this is what you see when you have 2 players of this caliber, playing at this high of a level. People are able to keep calm, keep focus on their win conditions and really just pilot their way as close as they can get and just hope that a little bit of luck carries them the rest of the way. It's just incredibly well done by both these trainers, and I cannot even imagine what's going through their heads going into Game 3.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised for Ashton to not have protected Groudon at the end there to bring in the Xerneas and sacrifices so you get the switch him back into Kangaskhan, but with that, it might still end up just coming down to a speed tie between the Groudons anyway. So Ashton might just be saying, you know what, it's going to come down to it. I'm just going to go for it now. But yeah, this third game is going to be really interesting. Ashton also revealed the Roar, so Flavio now can play around that potentially by not Geomancing immediately should he decide to go with like the same strategy of leading Incineroar and then pivoting out into Kangaskhan.
And do you think that the Incineroar is still the Pokemon to bring, though, over that Tornadus?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the double Fake Out is so strong here, and it has so many options. It's also able to take a Moonblast, as we saw from the opposing Xerneas. So I do like it a little bit more as an option here, because if you just match Ashton's team, you're going to be losing because you're slower with the Xerneas. I mean, it might come down to the speed ties, and he actually does bring the Tornadus, so we'll see how this plays out.
All right, Kangaskhan and Tornadus out on the field for Flavio, and Kangaskhan and Tornadus out on the field for Ashton as well. So we're looking at a repeat of game 1. So probably some fake out trades, maybe some tailwind trades, or I don't know, maybe we'll see some new tech on these Pokemon.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, the thing is, by bringing Tornadus, you should always bring Xerneas and Groudon in this matchup, so I would be surprised to see an Incineroar in the back, so, Flavio can't, for example, double pivot out into Incineroar and Xerneas, unless he decided to leave Groudon out, but I'd be really surprised by that. So, I mean, wouldn't be too surprised to see this play the same way it did turn in game 1, but then, what does Flavio do? Because then you're just content. I mean, are you just playing for the Groudon speed tie once again, which I think it's honestly very, very hard in this matchup to play around it.
And that's why I'm wondering if this Tornadus maybe has something we haven't seen yet, because otherwise, I feel like going back into game 1, this was a situation that you just kind of set yourself up to play the speed tie game, and I don't really feel like you want to be playing that going into, round 10 of Swiss at an international championship. You want to try and find something that's a little bit more reliable or dependable, at least, to sort of get that win.
Yep, but looks like we're seeing things play up exactly how they have. And once again, it's like you don't really have too much room for going for other plays, so it makes sense why these players are opting for it. Now, I mean, this time around, yeah, I said earlier that maybe you could delay the Tailwind by 1 turn, but that's also why Ashton prioritized knocking out Tornadus, because you don't want the Tailwinds to be staggered. So,
yep.
I mean, once again, it might just be a double Tailwind, both Tornadus is fainting, and then we go from there.
All right, well, only these trainers know what they're thinking at this point. I really like, though, how high level this is. I mean, you can only imagine just all these scenarios that are just flashing through these players' heads as they try to figure out what's the best option. Looks like Ashton did go for the Tailwind and will get it set up successfully. No Z move this time around, and Flavio this time going for that Z move. So could be the Supersonic Sky Strike. Most likely is going to be that Z Tailwind. Maybe worried about Ashton's Tornadus going first and taunting it, or yeah, that's the Z Tailwind. So it's all down to these Kangaskhan's. Going back to game 1, we saw Kangaskhan on Flavio's side of the field go for a low kick. This time, going for the double edge into that Tornadus for the KO. Actually, that was the low kick the turn after this. So, like you said, probably just going to see these Tornadus get knocked out, and then we'll start getting into the more interesting parts of this game.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's playing out exactly like game 1. This time, the players opted to, switch it up. Ashton not using the Z move and Flavio going for it. So, I mean, there was an opportunity to go for a Z move and go for the Hurricane, but you don't really want to risk that, obviously.
No.
Flavio, of course, could have low-kicked Ashton's Kangaskhan, but that shouldn't really get the knockout without any chip damage. So, yeah, once again, we're in the same position. Tailwinds have been traded, but once again, do you bring in Groudon or do you bring in Xerneas here? I mean, last time we saw Flavio bring out the Groudon, but he pretty much lost instantly after the speed tie. So, do the players want to risk it with the speed ties, or do they maybe this time want to bring the Xerneas knowing that the opposing Groudons are special?
All right, well, Ashton has chosen a Groudon to take his side of the field, and Flavio has chosen the Groudon as well. So here we go, Speed Tie City.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised Flavio was, this was his kind of strategy going, because I felt like he could have opted for the same thing as he did in game 1, but instead of Geomancing, because there's the Roar on the Kangaskhan, you just are content going for some quick damage with Moonblasts. But maybe, because the speed tie is so hard to ignore in this game, last game Flavio needed a speed tie and a little bit of good fortune. Maybe this time he's like, okay, if we play the same way and I win the speed tie, then I'll just win the game, so I'll take those chances. Either way, Groudons are both down, and it's just so hard to play around the speed tie because, you can't really just switch out, right? Both these players brought in Groudon knowing, okay, the other Groudon is probably coming in as well. So, I mean, we'll see if they maybe decide to protect with one of the Groudons, get some damage off on the other. There's always the potential flinch chances with the bites on both ends as well, so maybe players will actually add that into the factor as well. If you bite the Groudon, even if you're losing the speed type, then you add the flinch chance as well, so that at least gives a little bit more out. So, I mean, yeah, we'll have to see what the players opt for, but I wouldn't be surprised to see maybe both opt for a bite and an Earth Power into the opposing Groudon.
Oh, that would be stressful.
Yeah. So there's so much going on right now, but that's the nature of a mirror match. I mean, here we go. Oh, Kangaskhan actually opts to switch out, though.
All right, Ashton choosing to save that fake out for later as Xerneas is revealed as his final Pokemon. I think that was a pretty safe bet, though, for that spot. What I'm curious, though, is whether or not the Xerneas is going to be able to last the turn as Kangaskhan goes for the low kick into that Xerneas. So Ashton making a very defensive switch, not going to take any damage from that low kick.
Oh, who goes first?
Groudon on the Flavio side of the field will go first, will connect that Earth Power with the opposing Groudon, and it's a KO.
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, speed tie galore here. Ashton making the switch, knowing that his Kangaskhan will just feint to a low kick. So we actually didn't see the bite or Earth Power play come out from either end. But Flavio winning the speed tie here. I mean, now Ashton, of course, however, does get Kangaskhan and Xerneas out, so you can, of course, just fake out the opposing Kangaskhan and go for a Geomancy of your own. So it's not over yet, but that would mean Groudon would get a really powerful Eruption off that would knock out the Kangaskhan most likely and do a ton of damage to Xerneas, and then Flavio probably wins there. So I mean, once again, a big speed tie there, but we knew this game was going to come down to it, and yeah, I think like whoever wins that is in just such a good position to win the game. I'm trying to see how Ashton can maybe win this. I mean, you obviously get a fake out off here on one of the two, but the thing is, Kangaskhan and Groudon both threatened with so much damage right now, and with Groudon carrying Eruption, it will be able to just knock out the Kangaskhan. So, I mean, I think Flavio probably just clicks Eruption and Double Edge. And on Ashton's end, maybe you protect the Xerneas or just go for the Geomancy, and he's opting for the Geomancy option.
Yeah, it is really interesting, though, that Ashton did switch out his Kangaskhan there and sending in the Xerneas. Like, it was a very defensive play, but...
We'll just do enough. Let's see.
I don't know. It almost removed one of his options. Oh,
it gets the knockout! Crit, too!
Oh.
It looked like maybe it would have survived with like 1 or 2 HP. I'm not sure, but that
was close.
Yeah, that was one of the crits that actually... I mean, that's going to seal up the game for sure, but wow. I think Ashton going for the best play there, because if you don't fake out the Groudon, then the Eruption just comes out and you take so much damage with Kangaskhan.
Seriously.
And then the Xerneas will feint to another attack, basically. So, wow, I mean, Flavio definitely had the odds stacked against him because his Xerneas was slower in this matchup. But having the low kick was a pretty big advantage, and wow, the way he pulled out that second game. I mean, yes, he got a little bit fortunate, but he went for exactly the place he needed to. And to be able to pull that off after a pretty one-sided game one, really impressive. But ultimately, I mean, I feel like Ashton made all the correct plays. It's just in this matchup, it really does come down to those speed ties between the Groudons. Yeah,
and it was interesting how much pressure the low kick on Flavio's Kangaskhan put on Ashton's own Kangaskhan. Like, that switch on that second-to-last turn just felt like it was such a... It was a risk. I mean, you could go for the bite and just have that flinch chance, and, you know, that almost felt safer somehow. Like, it's such a tough call to make, and, you know, I gotta respect the defensive play that Ashton made, because if his Groudon had gone first, like we saw in Game 1, we would have been looking at a completely different outcome.
Yeah, I'm really curious if that critical hit ended up mattering. I mean, it was so close.
It was so close.
Like, I was thinking it probably doesn't, because, like, the Xerneas shouldn't have very much investment defensively, and that first one did so much damage, but I could totally have seen it hanging out with, like, 1 or 2 hit points as well. So, I don't know. I really feel like both players went for what they could have given the situation in that Game 3.
Definitely.
And so Flavio ended up actually having a slight advantage because of the low kick there. Neither player, once again, opting for that bite play, but that is a really risky play as well, because, first of all, on Ashton's end, he knows that the opposing Kangaskhan has low kick while his doesn't, right? So because of that, if you lose the speed tie, then you just go down immediately. So yeah, I mean, it was certainly an option. Neither player ended up going for it, but Flavio winning the latter 2 speed ties, really sealing this game up, or the series up. But I mean, yeah, mirror matches I think are always so fun to watch, but so stressful to play.
I know.
Especially in a mirror match like this, where you're using max speed Groudon and one will get the knockout on the other before the other can move. Like, that's just such a pivotal factor. And unfortunately, there aren't really many ways around it, right? Like, if you look at the other Pokemon both players had in this series, like, you're not really going to bring Metagross into this matchup. You're not really going to